Ethan Brooks slammed his truck door so hard the toolbox jumped on the seat, and then he just sat there, both hands white-knuckling the wheel. Because 3 years ago, in that same driveway, his wife had put their daughter in his arms, set a suitcase on the porch, and walked off without once looking back. He'd told himself he was finished. Done fixing. Done feeling. Then a leaking sink 2 houses down would put him on his knees in a stranger's kitchen, where a quiet young woman was about to say 6 words that cracked him wide open. Before we go further, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. And if a slow, honest love story is your kind of thing, hit that subscribe button and stay with me all the way to the end. You're going to want to be there when he finally understands what she meant. The bolt wouldn't move. Ethan Brooks braced one boot against the workbench, wrapped both hands around the wrench, and pulled until the tendons stood out on his forearms like cables. The rusted nut on his daughter's bike gave a screech, then a snap, and his knuckles dragged across the sprocket opening, a thin red line across the back of his hand. He didn't stop. He didn't even flinch. He wiped the blood on his jeans, reseated the chain, spun the pedal once with 2 fingers, and listened. It ran clean. No click, no drag. Fixed. 6:15 in the morning, and Ethan had already repaired the one thing in his life he actually knew how to repair. "Dad," a small voice from the doorway. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing, Lily." "It's not nothing. It's blood. Blood's just the body doing its job." He crouched down to her level, held up the bike by the handlebars, and gave it a little shake. "Chain's good now. No more slipping when you go up Miller's Hill." Lily was 7. She had her mother's eyes, and Ethan had spent 3 years teaching himself not to flinch every time she looked at him with them. "Can I have pancakes?" she said. It wasn't a question. Nothing Lily said was ever really a question. "You can have oatmeal." "That's not the same." "No," Ethan agreed. "It's not." He made the oatmeal. He cut a banana into it and pretended not to notice when she picked the banana out and lined the slices up on the rim of the bowl, like little soldiers. He packed her lunch turkey, no crusts. The apple cut in wedges, because she wouldn't eat it whole, and he walked her to the bus stop at the end of the street with his coffee going cold in his hand. "You gonna be home when I get back?" she asked. "I'm always home when you get back. Mrs. Peterson said you work too much." "Mrs. Peterson?" Ethan said, "should mind her own sink." The bus came. Lily climbed on without a hug because she was 7, and hugs at the bus stop were embarrassing. But she turned in the window seat and pressed her whole hand flat against the glass. Ethan lifted 2 fingers off his coffee cup. It was the closest thing they had to a ritual, and it undid him a little every single morning. Then the bus pulled away, and he was alone on the curb, and the quiet came down over him like it always did. People in the neighborhood thought they knew Ethan Brooks, the handyman, the reliable one. You call Ethan when the water heater dies at 11 at night, when the garage door won't close in a January storm, when your father-in-law's ancient recliner finally gives up, and you need someone who won't laugh at you for wanting to save it. He showed up. He fixed it. He charged a fair price, and he never made small talk longer than the job required. What they didn't know, what he made sure they didn't know, was that Ethan Brooks fixed other people's houses because he could no longer stand to sit inside his own. His phone buzzed against his hip. He almost let it go to voicemail. Then he saw the name, Carter. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Mrs. Carter. Oh, thank goodness you picked up." Her voice was the kind of warm that made you feel guilty for ever being in a bad mood. "Ethan, honey. I've got a situation. My kitchen sink is, well, it's not leaking so much as it's auditioning to be a fountain. There's water all under the cabinet, and I've got towels down, but the towels are losing Ethan. The towels are losing badly." Despite himself, the corner of his mouth moved. "How long's it been going?" "Since about 5 this morning. I heard the dripping and I thought, no, Margaret, that's the rain, but it is very much not the rain." "Did you shut the valve under the cabinet?" "Little oval knob turns clockwise." A pause. The sound of a woman lowering herself with some effort to a kitchen floor. "There are 3 little knobs, and they are all terrified of me. Turn the ones on the pipes going up to the faucet. Righty-tighty. Some grunting. A muttered word he chose not to comment on. Then, oh, it stopped. Ethan, you're a genius. You're a genius over the telephone. That'll hold the flood, but it's still broken. You want me to come look? I would love nothing more in this world, Mrs. Carter said, than for you to come look. The Carter house sat 2 doors down, and across the street a 2-story with white siding gone soft and gray. At the corners a porch swing that hadn't swung in a while and a flower bed out front that somebody clearly loved, and somebody clearly couldn't quite keep up with anymore. Ethan had passed it 1,000 times. He'd never been inside. Mrs. Carter opened the door before he could knock. She was 61 small, with silver hair pinned up in a way that had probably taken 20 minutes and was meant to look like it took none. She had a dish towel over one shoulder and reading glasses pushed up into her hair and a second pair hanging around her neck, and she looked at Ethan like he was the answer to a prayer she'd been too polite to say out loud. "You came fast," she said. "I was already standing outside. My daughter's bus just left." "Ah, Lily." Mrs. Carter said the name like she'd been saving it. "I see her wave at you every morning, from my window, the little hand on the glass." She pressed her own hand briefly to her chest. "It gets me every time. Come in before I embarrass us both on the porch." Ethan wiped his boots and stepped inside, toolbox in hand, and something in his chest went quiet and strange. He couldn't have told you what it was. The house wasn't fancy, but there were photographs on every wall, not the staged kind, the real kind. A man in an apron laughing, flower on his nose. A little girl in a Halloween cape. The same little girl grown up holding a paintbrush, squinting at something off camera. A wedding photo gone amber with age. There was a smell of coffee and cinnamon and old wood. And the whole place had the particular warmth of a home where people had been loved for a long time. And somebody had made sure you could still feel it in the walls. Ethan's own house had white walls. He'd never gotten around to putting anything on them. He'd told himself it was because he was busy. "Sink's this way," Mrs. Carter said, and led him into the kitchen. The cabinet under the sink was open towels shoved in a soggy heap, a bucket doing what it could. Ethan set his toolbox down, crouched, and put his head into the cabinet. "Give me a second to see what she's got going on. Take all the seconds you need. Can I get you coffee? I have coffee. I always have coffee. It's a sickness." "I'm all right." "You say that like men who are not all right always say it," Mrs. Carter said, and set a mug down next to him anyway. "Cream's in it. You look like a cream man." Ethan looked at the mug. He was, in fact, a cream man. He didn't ask how she knew. He got to work. It was the shut-off valve on the hot side. The old rubber washer had finally gone hardened and cracked with age, and the compression nut behind it had a hairline split that was weeping every time the line pressurized. Simple enough. $10 part 20 minutes of labor. He could have done it in his sleep. But Mrs. Carter pulled a chair out from the little kitchen table, sat down where she could see him, and started to talk. And Ethan found to his own surprise that he didn't mind. "My husband used to sit right where you're sitting," she said. "Right on that floor, cursing at that same sink. He was a baker, my Frank. Good with dough, terrible with plumbing. He'd have that cabinet open for a whole Saturday, and by the end of it, the sink would be worse than when he started, and there'd be a hole in the wall for some reason. And I'd say, 'Frank, honey, let's just call somebody,' and he'd say..." She stopped, smiled at nothing. "He'd say, 'Margaret, a man fixes his own house.'" Ethan's hands slowed on the wrench. "He passed," he asked. He didn't know why he asked. He never asked. 4 years ago, in the spring. She said it plainly, the way people say it when they've made a kind of peace with it, but the peace still cost them something to hold. He had the bakery downtown, the one on 5th, that's a phone store now. Broke my heart when they gutted it. But that's the way of it. Things get fixed into being something else. She looked at Ethan's back, at the careful, economical way he worked. "You do that too, you know. You fix things very carefully. Like they matter to you personally." "They're not mine," Ethan said. "That's why I'm careful. When it's somebody else's, you don't get to be sloppy about it." "And when it's yours?" He didn't answer that. He set the split nut aside and reached into his box for a replacement. Mrs. Carter watched him a moment longer, then let it go, the way kind people let things go. Not because they've lost interest, but because they've decided you'll come back to it when you're ready. Frank and I had one child, she said instead. A daughter, Emily. That's her up on the wall, the one with the paintbrush. She's 23 now, if you can believe it. Went off to art school on a scholarship, studied design, came back last year, and set up shop in the little apartment above what used to be the bakery. She does, what does she call it? She makes things look the way they're supposed to feel. Rooms, storefronts, book covers. She fixed up a diner over in Ridgeway, and now people drive 40 minutes just to eat there because the light hits the tables right. Can you imagine being that talented and that stubborn all at once? Sounds like her mother, Ethan said, mostly to be polite. Mrs. Carter laughed, delighted. Oh, he speaks. I was starting to think you communicated in wrench sizes. I communicate fine. I just don't do it when I'm not being paid. Well, she refilled her own coffee. I'm not paying you enough for the sink, so consider the conversation a discount you're giving me. What happened, Ethan? He looked up. Ma'am, you've got to look. I've been 61 years and married to a man 40 of them, and I raised a girl who feels everything twice as hard as anybody should. I know a shut door when I'm standing in front of one. She said it gently. You don't have to open it. I'm just telling you I can see it's there. For a long moment, the only sound was the drip of the disconnected line into the bucket. Then Ethan surprised himself. Maybe it was the house. Maybe it was the coffee with the cream she'd known he'd want. Maybe it was that she hadn't asked him to be useful, she'd asked him to be here. My wife left, he said. 3 years ago. Lily was 4. She didn't leave for another man or anything, nothing that clean. She just... He tightened the new nut a quarter turn, checked it, tightened it again. She said she felt like she was drowning. Married to a guy who fixed everybody's problems but couldn't sit still long enough to have a conversation. She said I was more comfortable under a sink than across a dinner table. He gave a short, dry breath that wasn't quite a laugh. The worst part is, she wasn't wrong. Where is she now? Portland. She sends birthday cards, calls on Sundays if she remembers what Sunday it is. He shook his head. I'm not bitter about it. She did what she had to do. I got a kid to raise and a business to run, and I figured out pretty quick that the best thing I can do is keep everybody's lights on, and their water running, and their doors closing. You do that long enough, a day goes by. Then another one. That's how it works. That's not a life, honey, Mrs. Carter said softly. That's a very well-maintained waiting room. Ethan didn't say anything, but the words landed somewhere under his ribs and stayed there. He finished the job in silence after that. Not a cold silence, but the kind that settles between two people who've said something true and are letting it sit. He replaced the washer, snugged the new compression nut, reconnected the hot line. He reached up under the cabinet, opened the little oval valves he'd talked her through over the phone, and stood at the counter to run the faucet. Water came up clean and steady. No hiss, no drip, no fountain. He shut it off, ran his fingers around the base of the pipe. Bone dry. There you go, he said. Good as new. Better, honestly. That washer was probably as old as the house. Mrs. Carter clasped her hands. Ethan Brooks, you are a miracle worker. I'm a guy with a $10 washer. Same thing in my experience. She stood, went to the counter, and before he could stop her, she was pressing folded bills into his hand, more than the job was worth. The way older folks always did, like they were paying you for showing up and not just for the work. No arguments. And you'll take a slice of coffee cake for Lily. I made it this morning before the flood. It's the one thing my Frank taught me that I didn't ruin. Mrs. Carter, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. That's rather the whole point of doing it. She was already wrapping a thick slice in wax paper. Now, I have one more thing to ask you, and I want you to know before I ask it that you're allowed to say no. Ethan zipped his toolbox shut. Go ahead. It's Emily's place, above the old bakery. Mrs. Carter kept her eyes very carefully on the coffee cake, folding the paper with more attention than it needed. That building's old and she's up there all alone, and there are a dozen little things. a window that won't latch, a radiator that clanks like a ghost. And I worry Ethan. I'm her mother. I'm supposed to worry, but a young woman living over an empty storefront and me 2 miles across town, and not a soul over there who knows a wrench from a rolling pin. She finally looked up. I'd sleep better if somebody I trusted just went and looked things over. Somebody careful, somebody who doesn't get sloppy when it's somebody else's. Ethan stood there in the warm kitchen, with the coffee cake in one hand and the folded bills in the other, and every instinct he'd built over 3 years told him to say what he always said. I'm pretty booked. I'll see if I can fit it in. Have her call the office. He looked at the wall of photographs. The little girl with the cape. The grown woman with the paintbrush squinting at some light only she could see. He thought about a very well-maintained waiting room. I've got jobs lined up through the week, he heard himself say. But I could swing by Thursday afternoon. Take a look. No charge for the looking. Mrs. Carter smiled, and it was not, Ethan would think much later, the smile of a woman who'd been surprised. It was the smile of a woman whose plan had just clicked shut as smooth and clean as a new washer seated in an old valve. Thursday, she said, pressing the coffee cake into his hands. That's perfect. I'll let her know a good man is coming. Ethan carried the cake and the money out to his truck and set them on the passenger seat where the toolbox usually rode. He climbed in, put the key in the ignition, and then for the second time that morning, he just sat there, both hands on the wheel. He didn't know why his heart was doing what it was doing. Nothing had happened. He'd fixed a sink. He'd said more than he meant to say to a kind old woman. He'd agreed to look at a window latch. That was all. He glanced across the street at the Carter house at the porch swing that hadn't swung at the flower bed. Somebody couldn't quite keep up with anymore. And then, without deciding to, he glanced 2 miles east toward downtown, toward 5th Street, toward an apartment above a bakery that wasn't a bakery anymore, where a young woman he'd never met was at that very moment probably squinting at some light only she could see. Ethan Brooks started the truck. For the first time in 3 years, he was driving toward Thursday instead of just getting through Wednesday. He didn't understand yet what that meant. He would. Thursday came the way Thursdays always came for Ethan Brooks, too slow at the start, and then all at once. He'd told himself it was just another lookover. A window latch. A clanking radiator. 40 minutes tops, and he'd be back in the truck by 4 to grab Lily off the bus. But at 3:15 that afternoon, sitting outside the old bakery on 5th Street, with the engine ticking as it cooled, Ethan realized he'd changed his shirt before coming. He noticed it the way you notice a splinter after the fact, when it's already under the skin. The gray one. The one without the paint stain on the cuff. He looked down at himself and felt something hot climb the back of his neck. It's a window latch, he said out loud to no one. You put on a clean shirt to fix a window latch. He grabbed his toolbox and got out before he could think about it any harder. The door to the upstairs apartment was around the side, a narrow staircase up the back of the building, and Ethan climbed it 2 steps at a time, because moving fast was the only thing that ever quieted him down. At the top, there was a landing and a single door painted a deep, warm blue. Not a builder's blue. Not a color you'd find on a shelf at the hardware store. Somebody had mixed that color. Somebody had cared what it looked like. He knocked. Nothing. He waited. Knocked again, harder. The door opened, and Ethan Brooks forgot for just a second what he was there to do. She wasn't what he'd built in his head. He hadn't even known he'd built anything until the real thing knocked it down. Emily Carter stood in the doorway with a pencil tucked behind one ear and a smudge of charcoal along the edge of her jaw, wearing an oversized man's flannel with the sleeves rolled to the elbow, and she looked at him with a stillness that was almost unsettling, like she wasn't seeing a handyman at all, but reading a page she'd already turned to. You're the man who fixes things, she said, not a question. Ethan, your mother sent me, about the window and the radiator that sounds like it's dying. Yeah. She stepped back to let him in. She sent you. She's been sending people my whole life. Last month it was a dentist she swore was single. Come in. 3:19 in the afternoon. He stepped inside and the same thing happened to him that had happened in Mrs. Carter's kitchen, only sharper. The apartment was small, and it was alive. There were canvases leaned 3 deep against the walls, jars of brushes on every flat surface, swatches of fabric pinned up in rows so somebody could see how the light moved across them through the day. It smelled like turpentine and coffee and something warm underneath. And it was, he understood immediately, the exact opposite of his own white-walled waiting room of a house. "You can put the box down anywhere that isn't wet paint," Emily said, "which narrows it down." Ethan set the toolbox on a bare patch of floor. "Where's the window?" "Straight to it. No small talk." She almost smiled. "My mother said you'd be like that." "Your mother said a lot of things, apparently." "She talks. It's her cardio." Emily crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe, watching him. "She likes you. That's rare. She thought the dentist was a con man within 10 minutes. Ethan found the window on the far wall, the sash painted half shut by decades of careless brushwork. The latch itself so caked over it wouldn't turn. Easy. He crouched, opened his box, and pulled out a utility knife to score the paint seam. "You always do that?" Emily asked. "Do what?" "Get down and start before you even know how bad it is. You didn't look at it, you just went straight to your knees and started cutting." Ethan's hand paused on the blade. 322. "It's a painted shut latch. I've seen 1,000 of them." "So you already knew, before you walked in?" She tilted her head. "That must be nice, knowing what's wrong before you get there." He didn't have anything to say to that, so he cut the paint seam clean and worked the latch free, and it turned with a satisfying little snap, and he told himself the small pull in his chest was just the good feeling of a thing coming loose. "There," he said. "Latch is good. Now the sash." He set his shoulder low against the frame and pushed, and the window shrieked up its track 2 inches, then stuck. He pushed harder. It gave another inch. Somebody painted this shut with the window open, half in, half out. That's why it fights you. "That's very poetic," Emily said. "Being painted shut halfway. It's just bad painting." "Sure." She pushed off the doorframe and came close enough now that he was aware of her, the way you're aware of a change in the weather. She didn't help. She didn't hover. She just stood a few feet back with her arms crossed and watched him and Ethan, who had worked in 1,000 kitchens and basements and back rooms, with people talking over him, or ignoring him, or watching game shows in the next room, had never in his life felt so thoroughly seen while doing something so ordinary. "You're staring," he said, not unkindly. "I'm studying," she said. "There's a difference. Staring is what you do when you want something. Studying is what you do when you want to understand something." A beat. "You do it too. To the window. You've been studying it since you walked in." He got the sash unstuck, ran it up and down its full travel twice, to be sure, then reached into his box for a candle stub to wax the tracks. His hands knew the work. His mind was somewhere it hadn't been in 3 years. 331. The window ran smooth. He latched it. Unlatched. It latched it again. Done. "Window's fixed," he said, standing. "Where's this radiator?" Emily led him down the short hall, and as they walked, she said over her shoulder in a voice that had gone quieter, "My dad used to say fixing things is how some men say the words they can't say out loud." Ethan stopped in the hallway. "Your dad," he said. "Frank." She turned surprised. "You knew his name." "Your mother told me. This morning. Well, Thursday. Tuesday." He rubbed the back of his neck. "She told me about the bakery, on 5th. That it's a phone store now." Something moved across Emily's face, a fast, complicated thing there and gone. "She told a stranger about the bakery." "I don't think she thinks of me as a stranger. I think she thinks of me as a project." And for the first time, Emily laughed a real one, low and surprised out of her, and it changed her whole face. 3:34 in the afternoon, and Ethan Brooks felt that laugh land somewhere he'd bricked over a long time ago. "That's exactly what you are," Emily said. "You should run, genuinely. Once she's got a project, she doesn't let go." "I fixed her sink. I'm not signing anything." "You put on a clean shirt to fix a window." Ethan froze. Emily's eyes flicked deliberate and slow to the cuff of his gray shirt, the one without the paint stain and back up to his face. And she didn't smile this time. She just held his eyes, letting him understand that she noticed things, all things that noticing was what she did with the whole of herself, and that he had walked into her home already, a little bit found out. "The radiator's in the bedroom," she said, and turned and left him standing there in the hall with his ears burning. He'd known men who talked too much and men who talked too little, and he'd always figured himself the second kind and been proud of it. But standing in that hallway, Ethan understood there was a third kind of person, entirely the kind who barely talked at all and still managed to say the one thing that took the floor out from under you. He followed her into the bedroom, and the radiator was under the window. An old cast iron thing gone the color of dried blood, and it was as promised, clanking a slow, arrhythmic knock. Knock, 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 like something trapped in the pipes trying to get out. "Trapped air," Ethan said, glad for something to hold on to. "And probably water sitting in the return where it shouldn't. Steam's trying to move and the water's in its way. That's the knock. I can bleed it. You can hear all that from across the room. I can hear all that from the truck." He knelt at the valve, pulled a small square key from his box, and fitted it to the bleeder. "You want to stand back a little. Sometimes it spits." She didn't stand back. Of course she didn't. She sat down on the edge of the unmade bed, a few feet away, pulled one knee up, wrapped her arms around it, and watched him with that same still total attention. 3:41. He cracked the valve. It hissed a long, angry hiss of trapped steam, and then went quiet, and then spat a little brown water into the rag he'd laid down, and then the pipe warmed evenly under his palm, and the knocking stopped. The silence after was enormous. "It stopped," Emily said softly. "It stopped. I've been listening to that sound for 4 months, every night. It got so I couldn't sleep without it, and I couldn't sleep with it either." She was quiet a moment. "You just walked in and made it stop in 5 minutes. That's the job." "No." She shook her head slowly. "That's not the job. The job is the window. Anybody with a knife can do the window." She looked at him. Really looked the way she'd looked when she opened the door, like he was a page she was turning back to. "You listen. You knew what was wrong from the sound. Most people don't listen to what's wrong. They wait for it to get loud enough to be a crisis, and then they call somebody like you. But you hear it early, when it's still just a knock." Ethan didn't move. His hands were still on the warm pipe. 3:43 in the afternoon. "It's just steam heat," he said, and it came out rougher than he meant it. "Okay," Emily said in a way that meant she knew it wasn't just steam heat, and she was going to let him have it anyway. He packed up the bleeder key. He was aware suddenly and acutely that the 2 jobs were done. The window was fixed. The radiator was quiet. There was no more reason to be in this warm, alive, terrifying apartment, and every instinct he had, the same instincts that had gotten him through 3 years of very well-maintained waiting room days, told him to stand up and pick up his box and say you're all set, and go stand on the curb and wait for the bus. He stood up. He picked up his box. "You're all," he started. "Do you want coffee?" Emily said, not a question. Her mother's daughter. "I've got to get my kid off the bus," Ethan said. "When?" 4. She looked at the clock on the wall. 3:46. "That's 14 minutes. It takes 6 to get to your street. You told me that without meaning to. You said you were already standing outside when my mother called you. Keep track of your own timing, like a man who's never once been late for that bus in 3 years." She stood up off the bed. "You have 8 minutes. I make fast coffee." Ethan stared at her. Nobody in 3 years had done the math on him like that. Nobody had listened close enough to know he counted minutes, or cared enough to catch him in it, or been bold enough to say it out loud, and then dare him with it. "You always do that," he said, throwing her own line back at her. "Do what? Study people until you know their whole schedule." "Only the interesting ones," Emily said, and went to make the coffee. He should have left. He knew he should have left. Instead, he set the toolbox back down and stood in the middle of her apartment, turning slowly, looking at the canvases leaned against the walls. Most of them were rooms, empty rooms, rendered in warm light, a chair by a window, a table set for one, a bed with the covers turned down. Beautiful and lonely, all of them. He didn't have words for art, but he had words for lonely, and he recognized it when he saw it hung 3 deep against a wall. "You painted these," he said. "I paint what things should feel like." Her voice came from the little kitchen over the sound of water. "That's my whole job, basically. Somebody's got a diner or a bookstore or a house that feels wrong, and I figure out what it's supposed to feel like, and I make it feel that way. Color light where the eye lands." A pause. "It's easier than it sounds. Most places are just one small broken thing away from being warm. People walk past the broken thing for years because they've stopped seeing it." Ethan looked at a painting of a bed with the covers turned down and nobody in it. 349. "What's this one supposed to feel like?" he asked. Emily came back with 2 mugs. She handed him one cream already in it, he noticed, and he didn't ask how she knew, because he was starting to understand that she just knew that knowing was the thing she did, and she stood beside him and looked at the painting for a long moment. "That one's supposed to feel like the second before you're not alone anymore," she said. "The turned-down covers, the waiting, right before." She sipped her coffee. "I never finished it. I couldn't figure out how to paint the part that comes after. I've never seen it." The apartment was very quiet. "Emily," Ethan said, and he didn't know what he was going to say after her name, only that saying it felt like stepping off something. "You should go get your daughter," she said gently before he could find the rest of it. "Lily. That's her name, right? My mom told me. The little hand on the window glass." Ethan set the coffee down half drunk. His heart was doing that thing again, the thing it had done in the truck outside her mother's house, and he still didn't understand it, and he was starting to suspect he wasn't supposed to. "Yeah," he said. "Lily, I've got to go." "I know." Emily walked him to the blue door. "Thank you for the window and the radiator, and for listening to it before it got loud." He stopped in the doorway. 3:52 in the afternoon, 6 minutes to the bus, and he made himself say the professional thing because it was the only rope he had left to hold. "If anything else comes up another window, whatever, you've got the office number, or your mom does. Just call and I'll—" "You'll fit me in," Emily finished. There was something in her voice, something almost sad. "Sure. Have your girl call the office. I know the speech." She looked at him, and the stillness in her face cracked just slightly, just enough for him to see there was a whole person behind it who'd learned to hold very still for reasons of her own. "You always do that too, don't you? Fix the thing, then build a fence around yourself before you're even down the stairs. Fix it and run. Fix it and run." "I'm not running. I've got a kid to—" "You've got a kid to get to the bus, yes." She said it softly, no accusation in it, which somehow made it worse. "But you were running before you had her. My mom told me about your wife. Portland. Sunday calls." Emily's voice dropped, and the next thing she said carefully, the way you set down something you're afraid to break. "You fix everything you touch, Ethan Brooks. Windows, radiators, sinks, bikes, everybody's broken little things. But you never stay anywhere long enough to be fixed yourself." Ethan stood absolutely still. For 3 years, he had been the one who arrived. The one who assessed, the one who knew what was wrong before he got there. For 3 years, he had been on the outside of the problem, kneeling in front of it, with a wrench in control of it above it. And in one quiet sentence, said by a girl of 23 with charcoal on her jaw, who he'd known for exactly 34 minutes, the problem had reached up and grabbed him. He felt it in his throat first. The thing he never let get loud. "I've got to go," he said. And his voice wasn't steady, and they both heard it. "Go get Lily," Emily said. And then as he turned to the stairs, she added so quietly he almost missed it. "The bed's broken too, by the way." Ethan stopped halfway down the first step. "What?" "The bed." She was leaning in the blue doorframe, arms crossed, watching him with that same total stillness. "The frame. It cracked a couple weeks ago. I've been sleeping on the mattress on the floor. I didn't mention it because you were already leaving and it seemed like a lot to ask." A pause. "But it's broken. If you ever come back, my bed is broken too. And there it was. 6 words, said light. Said almost like a joke, except that nothing about the way she said them was a joke. Ethan stood on the staircase with his toolbox in his hand and his heart hammering, and Lily's bus 4 minutes out, and he felt the whole careful architecture of his life shift half an inch on its foundation. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He said, I've got to think about my schedule. And he went down the stairs fast, the way he did everything fast. And he made it to the truck and made it to Lily's street with 90 seconds to spare. And he stood on the curb with his heart still going and lifted 2 fingers off his coffee cup when the bus rolled up, and Lily pressed her hand flat to the glass, and for once, he barely saw it. Dad? Lily climbed down the bus steps, backpack sliding off one shoulder. You look weird. I look fine. You look weird. Like Mrs. Peterson's cat when it sees the vacuum. That's a very specific look, Lily. It's the look you have. She took his hand, which she almost never did anymore, and squinted up at him. Did something break? 4:02 in the afternoon. Ethan looked down at his daughter, his wife's eyes in her face, the whole of his life in her small hand. And he thought about a young woman leaning in a blue doorway saying, My bed is broken too. And he thought about a painting of turned-down covers with nobody in it. And he thought about the part that comes after that she'd never seen and couldn't paint. No, he told his daughter. Nothing broke. But that night after Lily was asleep, Ethan Brooks sat at his own kitchen table in his own white-walled house, and he could not stop thinking about the one thing Emily Carter had said that he hadn't been able to answer. You never stay anywhere long enough to be fixed yourself. He got up. He walked through his house, the house he'd lived in for 3 years without hanging a single thing on the walls. White in the living room. White in the hall. White in Lily's room, except for the drawings she'd taped up herself crooked at the height of a child. He stood in the middle of it and understood for the first time that he hadn't been too busy to decorate. He'd been keeping the walls blank on purpose. A house you don't finish is a house you can leave. A life you don't hang anything on is a life that can't fall and break. His phone was in his hand before he decided to pick it up. He didn't call Emily. He didn't have her number, she'd never given it to him. He realized she'd only given him the 6 words and let him walk away with them. He called Mrs. Carter. She picked up on the second ring at 9:40 at night, sounding not the least bit surprised. Ethan, how lovely. Did the window behave? Window's fine. Radiator too. It was trapped air like I figured. You called at 9:40 to tell me it was trapped air. Ethan closed his eyes. No, Mrs. Carter agreed warmly. I didn't think so. There was a silence on the line, and Ethan stood in his blank white kitchen and made himself say it. Your daughter said something to me, before I left. Emily says a lot of things. It's a family trait. She said... He stopped, started again. She noticed things about me, things I haven't said to anybody. She figured them out just from watching me fix a window. His voice went rough. How does she do that? Mrs. Carter was quiet a moment. When she spoke, all the teasing had gone out of her, and what was left was just a mother, careful and true. Because she's had to, honey, she said. When Frank got sick, it was fast at the end, faster than any of us were ready for. Emily was 19. She dropped out of art school for a semester to come home and help me nurse him. And a 19-year-old girl watching her father get quieter and quieter, running out of ways to reach him, she learned to read a person from the outside. She learned to hear what's wrong before it gets loud. Because by the time it got loud with Frank, it was almost too late to say the things. A soft breath. She reads people because for a while their reading her father was the only way she had left to love him. She never unlearned it. I don't think you unlearn something like that. Ethan sat down at his kitchen table because his legs weren't entirely holding him. She paints empty rooms, he said. She does. There's one that's a bed with the covers turned down, nobody in it. She said she couldn't finish it because she's never seen the part that comes after. His throat closed. The part where you're not alone. Mrs. Carter didn't say anything for a long moment. And when she did, her voice had a thickness in it that told Ethan she was somewhere between crying and smiling, the way only mothers of grown children ever seem to be. "I've been trying to send that girl a reason to finish that painting for 4 years," she said. "Dentists, a very nice accountant. The boy who reads the meter, God help me. Nothing took. She'd meet them and go still and polite, and I'd know within the hour it was no." A pause. "You fixed my sink 3 days ago, Ethan. And she called me last night. She never calls me 2 nights running, and she didn't say much. You know how she is. But right before she hung up, she said, 'Mom, the handyman.' Just that. 'Mom, the handyman.' And then she was quiet for a long time on the phone. And Ethan, honey, that quiet, I've been waiting 4 years to hear that particular quiet out of my daughter." Ethan sat in the dark of his blank kitchen with the phone pressed hard to his ear. "I don't know how to do this," he said. It was the truest thing he'd said out loud in 3 years. "I fixed everybody's stuff so I wouldn't have to be the one sitting across the table. Emily's right about me. I fix it and I run. That's the whole thing I am, Mrs. Carter. That's all there is." "That is not all there is," Mrs. Carter said. And now there was steel in the warmth. The steel of a woman who had buried a husband and kept a household and raised a wounded girl into someone who could quiet a room with her stillness. "You want to know how I know? Because a man who was only a fixer would have hung the window latch and left and never thought about it again. He would not be calling a 61-year-old widow at 9:40 at night with his voice shaking, asking how her daughter got so good at seeing people." She let that sit. "You're not calling about the radiator, Ethan. You've never once been calling about the radiator. So the only question I have for you is a simple one, and you can take all the time you need to answer it, but I think you already know." "What's the question?" Ethan said. "Are you going to come fix that broken bed?" Mrs. Carter said gently. "Or are you going to run one more time and spend the rest of your life in that empty house you never hung a single picture in?" Ethan Brooks sat very still. 10:04 at night. Down the hall his daughter breathed slow and even in her sleep, under drawings taped crooked at a child's height, the only color in the whole White House. He thought about the bolt on Lily's bike that wouldn't move, and how he'd braced his boot and pulled until his knuckles bled, rather than let one small broken thing stay broken. He thought about a girl who'd learned to read the dying, because it was the last language of love she had left. He thought about the part that comes after, that nobody had ever shown her that she couldn't paint because she'd never seen it. "How'd you know I never hung any pictures?" he said. "You've never been in my house." "I didn't," Mrs. Carter said. "You just told me. That's how it works, honey. That's how she does it too. People tell you everything if you're quiet enough to let them." A pause, and he could hear the smile come back into her voice, the smile of a woman whose plan had clicked shut clean as a new washer in an old valve. So, the bed. Saturday. "She's home Saturdays, and Ethan, wear whatever shirt you want. She already noticed the clean one. There's no putting that back." Ethan let out a breath that was half a laugh and half something he hadn't let out in 3 years. "Saturday," he said. "Saturday." Mrs. Carter agreed, and there was a whole lifetime of quiet triumph in the single word. "Get some sleep, honey." And Ethan the coffee cake. "Did Lily like it?" Ethan looked over at the counter where the wax paper sat empty and folded. "She ate the whole slice, and then she cried when there wasn't more." "Good?" Mrs. Carter said, warm and certain and final. "That's exactly what's supposed to happen. Good night, Ethan." She hung up. Ethan sat alone at his kitchen table for a long time after that, in a white-walled house with nothing on the walls, holding a phone gone dark. And for the first time in 3 years, he did not get up to fix anything. He just sat with the ache of it, the strange, unfamiliar, terrifying ache of wanting something he could not repair with a wrench. Down the hall, Lily turned over in her sleep and said something soft and meaningless the way children do. And 2 miles east over a bakery that wasn't a bakery anymore, a young woman lay on a mattress on the floor beside a broken bed frame, wide awake, listening to the silence where the radiators knock. Used to be the silence a stranger had walked in and made in 5 minutes without even being asked, and she stared up at an unfinished painting of turned-down covers and let herself just barely. Just for tonight, imagine the part that comes after. Ethan finally stood. He rinsed his coffee mug. He turned off the kitchen light. And on his way down the hall to bed, he stopped in front of one of the blank white walls. The big one, the one across from the front door. The first thing anybody would see coming in. And he stood there and looked at all that emptiness he'd kept so carefully for 3 years. Then he reached up very slowly and pressed his flat palm against it. The way Lily pressed her hand to the bus window every morning. The way you touch a thing when you're finally ready to admit it's yours. He held his hand there a long moment in the dark. Then he went to bed, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan Brooks fell asleep, thinking not about a day to get through, but about a Saturday to get to. Saturday morning, 9:02. Ethan Brooks stood in front of his open closet and did the thing he'd sworn he wouldn't do. He looked at the shirts. "It's a bed frame," he told the closet. "You've fixed 40 bed frames." But he'd never fixed one for a woman who'd looked at his cuff and known his whole marriage from a clean sleeve. And he stood there long enough that Lily wandered in behind him in her pajamas, holding the plastic pony she'd slept with since she was 4. "Why are you staring at your clothes?" she said. "I'm not staring." "You're doing the vacuum cat face again." Lily climbed onto the edge of his unmade bed and studied him with her mother's eyes. "You did it yesterday too, and you keep looking at your phone and then putting it down without doing anything. Is it Mom?" Ethan turned around. "No, baby, it's not Mom." "Then who is it?" 9:05 in the morning, and Ethan Brooks realized he did not have an honest answer that a 7-year-old couldn't see straight through, so he gave her the truest one he had. "It's a job. A friend of Mrs. Carter's needs a bed fixed. The coffee cake lady. Her daughter." Lily considered this with the grave seriousness she brought to all important matters. "Is she nice?" Ethan thought about, "You never stay anywhere long enough to be fixed yourself," and about a painting of turned-down covers, and about the particular way Emily Carter went still when she was reading a person all the way to the bottom. "She's—" He stopped. "She notices things, like you do." "I like her already," Lily announced, and slid off the bed. "Can I come?" And there it was, the question Ethan hadn't seen coming, the one that closed his throat. Because in 3 years he had kept 2 things carefully surgically apart: the work and Lily. Nobody he fixed things for ever met his daughter. Lily was the wall's blank part of his life, the part he protected by never hanging anything on it, and the idea of walking her up a back staircase to a blue door felt like reaching up to press his palm flat against a wall he'd sworn he'd never touch. "Not this time," he said. "You've got a play date with Sophie at 10. Her mom's picking you up." "Fine." Lily didn't push. She never pushed. She was his daughter. But at the door she stopped and delivered with devastating 7-year-old accuracy the thing that would ride in the truck with him the whole way downtown. "You should let me meet her sometime. You don't let anybody meet me. It's like you're keeping me in a box so nobody can take me." She frowned. "But Dad, nobody can take me. I already got taken once, and then I came back." 9:11 in the morning. Ethan stood in the doorway of his bedroom and could not for a moment breathe. "Go get dressed for Sophie's," he managed. She went, and Ethan stood there with the sentence lodged under his ribs like a splinter. "I already got taken once, and then I came back," and he understood that his daughter had been carrying the divorce differently than he'd let himself believe, had built it into a story where she was a thing that could be removed, and that his blank white walls hadn't protected her from anything. They'd just taught her that home was a place you didn't decorate in case you had to leave it fast. He picked up his phone. He put it down. He picked it up again, and finally texted Mrs. Carter because she was the only rope he had on my way over to Emily's. 9:40 or so. The reply came back in under a minute. "She knows. She's been up since 7 cleaning, which she never does. Wear the clean shirt, honey. Live a little." Ethan wore a flannel with a paint stain on the cuff. On purpose. He wasn't sure what he was proving or to whom. He dropped Lily with Sophie's mom, waved off the small talk, and drove downtown with his hands too tight on the wheel and the toolbox riding shotgun where a person should sit. 9:38, he parked outside the old bakery. 9:39, he climbed the back stairs two at a time. 9:40, he stood on the landing in front of the deep blue door and made himself knock before he could talk himself back down the stairs. The door opened, and Emily Carter looked at his cuff first. "You wore the stain on purpose," she said. "I wore a work shirt to do work. You wore the stain because I noticed the clean one, and it embarrassed you so. Now you're overcorrecting to prove you don't care what I notice." She stepped back to let him in. "Which means you care very much. It's actually a compliment, a confusing one." Ethan walked in and set his toolbox down and decided right there that he was going to stop losing every single exchange the second he opened his mouth. "You know," he said, "most people just say good morning." "Good morning?" Emily said, and there was that almost smile again. "The bed's in the bedroom. You've seen it. You've heard the radiator you already fixed, which means you'll notice the apartment is very quiet now, which means you'll know I couldn't sleep last night, because I'm not used to the quiet yet. I'm telling you that, so you don't have to figure it out and pretend you didn't." 9:43 of the morning, and Ethan Brooks felt the floor tilt half an inch the way it kept doing around her. "That's a lot to hand a guy before he's had coffee," he said. "You want coffee? I want to see the bed." But he did in fact want the coffee, and she made it anyway. Cream already in, and he followed her into the bedroom where the mattress lay on the floor beside the cracked frame, and he crouched down to look at the break and felt something in his chest ease into the familiar. Wood, a cracked rail, a stripped bolt hole. This he understood. This had rules. "It's the side rail," he said, running his thumb along the split. "See where it went. The bolt that holds it to the headboard stripped out, and once that let go, all the weight came down on the rail and it cracked along the grain. It's an old frame. Good wood, though. Real oak. Not the particle board junk they sell now." He looked up at her. "This is fixable. I can pull the rail glue and clamp the cracked drill out the stripped hole and put in a threaded insert so it never strips again. It'll be stronger than it was new." Emily sat down on the edge of the mattress a few feet away and wrapped her arms around one knee the way she had before. "You get happy when you find a thing you can fix. Did you know that your whole face changes? It's the only time it changes." It's not a criticism. It's the nicest thing about you." She said it plainly, no flirtation in it, which somehow made it land harder. "You came in here braced for something. I watched you at the door. You had your shoulders up around your ears. And then you saw the broken rail, and you understood it, and your shoulders came down. Because a broken bed is a thing that has rules, and you like rules, because rules are how you know you can't fail." A pause. "People don't have rules. That's what scares you." 9:48. Ethan sat back on his heels and looked at her for a long moment. "You did it again," he said quietly. "Did what?" "That thing where you say the true thing out loud. The thing I'd never say." He set down the rail he'd been holding. "Your mother told me why you do it. Why you read people like that." Emily went very still. It was a different stillness than before, not the calm, watchful kind, a braced kind. "What did she tell you? About your dad, Frank? That you came home from art school when he got sick? That you learned to—" Ethan chose the words carefully because he could see he was near something that mattered. "That you learned to hear what was wrong before it got loud, because by the time it got loud with him, it was almost too late to say things." For a long moment Emily didn't move at all, and when she spoke, her voice had lost every bit of its easy, knowing edge, and what was underneath was younger and rawer than anything she'd shown him. "She had no right to tell you that," Emily said, but there was no anger in it, just something bruised. "That's mine. She wasn't gossiping. She was trying to explain you to me because I called her at 9:40 at night, not understanding how a stranger could see straight through me." Ethan's own voice had dropped. "She loves you. She's scared for you. She sends you dentists." Emily let out a breath that was almost a laugh, and it broke a little in the middle. 9:52 in the morning. "The dentist was a nightmare. He talked about molars for an hour. She told me about the boy who reads the meter too." "Oh, God!" Emily pressed the heel of her hand to her eyes, and Ethan saw with a jolt that she was pushing back tears and covering it with the joke. The meter boy. He was 20 and he called me ma'am. She laughed, wet and unsteady. My mother has spent 4 years trying to hand me a reason to... She stopped herself. A reason to what? Ethan said. Emily lowered her hand. Her eyes were bright, and she didn't try to hide it now. You saw the painting, she said. The bed with the covers turned down, the one I can't finish. You said you'd never seen the part that comes after. I haven't. She looked at him, and all her armor was down, and it was almost unbearable how much she let him see. After my dad died, I got very good at understanding people, and very bad at letting them close. Because when you can read everybody, you see all the ways it's going to go wrong before it starts. I meet a man, and within 10 minutes I know exactly how he'll leave and what he'll say when he does, and I'm so tired, Ethan. I'm 23, and I'm so tired of already knowing the ending. Her voice cracked. And then my mother's handyman fixes her sink and comes up my stairs, and I watch you for 30 minutes, and for the first time in 4 years... She stopped. For the first time in 4 years, what? Ethan said. His heart was going hard. I couldn't see the ending, Emily whispered. I watched you fix my window and my radiator, and I could not for the life of me read how it goes wrong. And that terrified me so much I told you my bed was broken just so you'd have to come back because I'm a coward who can read everyone except the one person I finally can't, and I needed one more chance to figure out how you leave before you leave. 9:57 of the morning. The apartment was so quiet, Ethan could hear the refrigerator hum in the next room. He set the broken rail down on the floor very gently, the way you set down something that matters. I'll save you the trouble, he said, and his voice wasn't steady either. You want to know how I leave? I don't leave loud. I don't slam doors. My wife told me the worst part about me leaving was that I never really arrived, so there was nothing to slam. I just get quiet. I find the next thing to fix, and I go fix it. And I tell myself I'm being useful, and one day the person I'm with realizes I've been gone for years, and I never even packed a bag. He made himself hold her eyes. That's how I leave Emily. Now you know the ending. It's an ugly one. No, Emily said softly. No, you just told me the ending you're afraid of. That's not the same as the ending. She uncurled from the edge of the mattress and moved closer, and she didn't touch him. She just came close enough that he had to choose whether to look away, and he didn't look away. A man who leaves by getting quiet doesn't drive downtown and tell a woman the exact mechanism of how he'd fail her. He just gets quiet. You're doing the opposite of the thing you're scared of. You're the loudest quiet man I've ever met. Ethan Brooks, who had not cried in front of another adult in longer than he could count, felt his eyes go hot. I don't know how to do this, he said for the second time in 3 days. I've got a kid. I've got a whole life built out of not doing this. I know. She said something this morning. Lily, my daughter. He didn't know why he was telling her except that Emily made a space where the true things came out. She said I keep her in a box so nobody can take her. And then she said nobody can take me. I already got taken once, and then I came back. His voice broke clean through. She thinks she's a thing that can be removed, because of me. Because I built a life where nothing's on the walls in case we have to run. And Emily Carter did the thing then that no dentist or accountant or meter boy had ever gotten close enough to do. She reached out and put her hand flat against the center of Ethan's chest. Not a hug, not a caress, just a flat palm pressed over his sternum, the exact way he'd pressed his hand to the blank white wall 2 nights before. The exact way Lily pressed hers to the bus glass every morning, and she held it there. 10:02, she said quietly. In the morning, on a Saturday. I want you to remember this exact minute because I'm about to say something I've never said to anyone, and I need you to know I'm not reading you when I say it. I'm not doing the thing. I'm just telling you the truth blind with no idea how it ends. She pressed her palm a little firmer against his chest. I don't want to fix you, Ethan. That's your whole fear, isn't it? That I'm one more person who's going to try to repair you and give up when I can't. I don't want to fix you. There's nothing about you that's broken. There's just a man who's been holding his own hand flat against a wall for 3 years, afraid to hang anything on it. And all I've wanted since you walked in and made my radiator stop knocking, is to stand next to that wall, not fix it, just stand next to it. So you're not the only one holding it up anymore. Ethan Brooks put his hand over his own heart, and he held it there, and something inside him that had been clenched shut for 3 years came loose all at once. Not with a snap, but the way a rusted bolt finally turns after you've braced your boot and pulled until your knuckles bled slow, and then suddenly, and then free. He didn't kiss her. It wasn't that kind of minute. He just held her hand against his chest and let her feel his heart doing the thing it had been doing since her mother's driveway, and he said the only true thing left in him. I don't know how this ends. I know, Emily whispered. Isn't it wonderful? 10:04 in the morning. And for a long moment in a quiet apartment over a bakery that wasn't a bakery anymore. Two people who had each gotten very, very good at knowing how things end stood together, not knowing, and let it be the best thing that had happened to either of them in years. Then, because he was Ethan Brooks, and because his hands needed something to do with all the feeling that had nowhere else to go, he pulled back and cleared his throat and said in a voice gone thick, I should the bed. I should fix the bed. That's what I came to do. And Emily laughed, really laughed, the tears spilling over now, but the laugh underneath them bright and unguarded, and wiped her face with the heel of her hand and said, Yeah, okay. Fix the bed. You loud, quiet, impossible man. Fix the bed. He fixed the bed. He worked for 2 hours, and Emily didn't leave. She sat cross-legged on the floor a few feet away and watched him. The way she watched everything. And this time, he let himself be watched. And every so often, he'd explain what he was doing. The threaded insert, the way the clamp had to sit overnight before the glue cured. And she'd ask a question that was really about something else, and he'd answer it, and they both knew. He pulled the cracked rail. He worked wood glue deep into the split with a thin blade and clamped it tight. He drilled out the stripped bolt hole and tapped in a brass insert so the bolt would bite metal instead of tired old wood. 10:50, 11:20, 11:50. And while the glue set under its clamps, they sat on the floor of her bedroom with their backs against the wall and drank a second cup of coffee, and Emily told him about her father, the real Frank, not the sick one. The one who dusted flour off his hands and danced her mother around the bakery kitchen after closing, the one who taught Emily that a room should feel like something. And Ethan told her about the marriage, the whole of it, the drowning his wife had described, and the way he still didn't fully understand it, and the way he was starting to. Can I ask you something? Emily said at 12:06. You're going to anyway. Why'd you say no when Lily asked to come today? Ethan set his mug down. How do you... I never told you she asked. You didn't have to. You flinched when I said, the bed's in the bedroom, like the word bedroom near your kid was a wire you didn't want touched. And you keep checking your phone at exactly the times a school-age kid's day has breaks in it. And when you talk about her, your voice does a thing it does about nothing else. Emily shrugged, gentle. So, she asked to come. And you said no. Why? 12:08 in the afternoon. And Ethan Brooks understood that this was the real repair, the one under all the others. The crack in the rail that everything else had been resting its weight on. Because if she meets you, he said slowly, then you're real. Then this is a thing that's happening in my actual life, in the part with her in it, and if it goes wrong... His jaw worked. She's already got a story where she's a thing that can be taken and brought back. I can't hand her another person who leaves. I can survive it. She's 7. She'll build her whole life around it. He looked at Emily, and there was no armor left on either of them now. So I keep her in the box, not to protect her from being taken, to protect her from watching me get quiet and disappear one more time in front of somebody she started to love. The clamps ticked as the glue cured. Somewhere below, a truck went by on 5th Street. Emily didn't say anything for a moment, and when she did, She didn't reach for his chest or his hand, or any of the moves a lesser woman would have made. She just looked at him with those still-seeing eyes, and she said the thing that would ride home in the truck with him, the thing that would still be sitting in his chest at 2 in the morning, the thing that took the last wall down. "Then don't introduce me as somebody you're dating," Emily said. "Introduce me as the lady whose bed you fixed. Low stakes, no promises. I'll be a person she met once. And if it goes wrong, I was just the coffee cake lady's daughter, and she'll never know she was supposed to be afraid." She held his eyes. "But Ethan, if it goes right, then someday a long time from now you get to tell her that the first time she ever saw me was the day her dad finally let somebody stand next to his wall. And she won't remember being scared. She'll just remember there was a nice lady. And then one day there was always a nice lady. And the walls started to have things on them." Emily's voice dropped to almost nothing. "You don't have to decide the ending to let her in the room. You just have to let her in the room." 12:14 in the afternoon. Ethan Brooks sat with his back against a young woman's bedroom wall, the glue curing on a bed he'd fixed, 3 years of blank white walls behind him, and something he couldn't name in front of him, and he heard himself say the words before he'd decided to the way all the true things came out around her. "There's a diner," he said, "over in Ridgeway. Lily loves it. She says the light hits the tables right." He watched Emily's face change. "You did that one, didn't you? Your mother said you fixed up a diner in Ridgeway and now people drive 40 minutes for it." Emily had gone very still. "I did that one. My daughter's favorite place in the world," Ethan said, "is a room you made feel like something." His voice broke on it. "She's been sitting in your work for a year and I never knew. She points at the window where the light comes in and she says, 'Dad, this is the good one.'" He shook his head slowly, undone by it. "So here's what we're going to do. Next Saturday. You, me, and Lily. At the good one. And I'm going to introduce you as the lady who fixed the bed. Low stakes, no promises." He held her eyes, and for the first time since his wife stood in that driveway 3 years ago, Ethan Brooks chose to hang something on the wall. And we'll see. Emily Carter, who could read every man alive who always knew the ending, who'd told him she was so tired of already knowing, looked at Ethan Brooks, and for the second time in 4 years could not see how it went. "Okay," she whispered. "The good one. Next Saturday." "Next Saturday," Ethan said. The clamps ticked. The glue held. And downstairs on 5th Street, the phone store sat where a bakery used to be, and 2 miles west. A little girl played at Sophie's house, not knowing her whole world had just quietly shifted half an inch onto a new foundation. And in a bright, alive apartment full of paintings of empty rooms, a man and a woman sat against a wall and did the bravest thing either of them had done in years. They let it stay unfinished. They let it stay open. They let it for once just be a beginning. The week between that Saturday and the next was the longest week of Ethan Brooks's life, and it went by in about 4 minutes. He knew that didn't make sense, but that was how it felt. Every hour he was working, and he took every job that came: the leaky trap over on Chestnut, the garage door for the Hendersons, the water heater that died at 11 at night for a family he'd never met, every hour dragged like a rail with a stripped bolt. And then he'd get home and put Lily to bed and sit at his kitchen table, and he'd text Emily one line and she'd text one back, and suddenly it was midnight and the whole evening had collapsed into nothing. Monday 9:40 at night he texted water heater. "Tonight took 2 hours. Guy tried to pay me in Venmo and firewood." She wrote back, "Did you take the firewood?" "I took the firewood." Good. A man who takes firewood over money is a man who understands winter. And then a minute later, Lily know about Saturday. Yet. Ethan looked at the message a long time. Not yet. "Ethan, I'll tell her. I'm working up to it. You fix water heaters at 11 at night for strangers, but you can't tell your kid you're taking her to her favorite diner." He'd smiled at his phone in the dark like an idiot, because she was right, and because being caught by Emily Carter had stopped feeling like being exposed and started feeling like being known, which he was discovering were 2 very different things wearing the same coat. He told Lily on Wednesday, 6:15 in the morning, oatmeal on the table, banana lined up in soldiers on the rim of the bowl. Saturday, he said as casual as he could make it. We're gonna go to the diner in Ridgeway. The good one. Lily's head came up. The good one? On a Saturday, we only go there on birthdays. I know. Whose birthday is it? Nobody's. I just thought. Ethan turned back to the counter so she couldn't see his face do whatever it was about to do. The lady I fixed the bed for. Mrs. Carter's daughter. She's the one who made the diner feel the way it feels. The light on the tables, you like she did that. That's her job. So I thought we'd all go. So you could meet the person who made your favorite place. The silence behind him lasted long enough that he turned around. Lily was looking at him with her mother's eyes, and there was something ancient and knowing in a 7-year-old's face that made his stomach drop. Is she your girlfriend? Lily said. 6:17 in the morning. And Ethan Brooks, who had rehearsed low stakes, no promises. The lady who fixed the bed opened his mouth to say all of it, and found he could not lie to the one person he'd spent 3 years protecting with blank walls. I don't know what she is yet, he said. That's the truth, baby. I don't know, but I like her, and she made your favorite place. And I wanted you to meet her, and if you don't like her, you tell me, and that's the end of it. You've got veto power. Okay, you're the boss of this. Lily considered this the way she considered everything, gravely turning it over. Then she picked up a banana soldier and ate it, the first banana she'd voluntarily eaten in her whole life, and said, Does she know I already got taken once and came back? Ethan had to grip the edge of the counter. She knows, he said. I told her. And you know what she said? What? She said that just means you're brave. She said most people never get taken and brought back, so they don't know they can survive it. But you do, so you're braver than everybody. It wasn't exactly what Emily had said, but it was the true shape of it. And Lily's whole face changed that particular light a kid gets when a wound they've been carrying alone gets held by somebody else for a second. Okay, Lily said. I'll meet her. And then sliding off her chair with the imperial confidence of the very young. But I'm getting pancakes. It's the good one. You have to get pancakes at the good one, Dad. It's the rule. It's the rule. Ethan agreed, and his voice was not entirely steady, and Lily pretended not to notice, because she was his daughter, and she'd learned that too. Saturday came, 11:40 in the morning. Ethan pulled into the gravel lot of the Ridgeway Diner with Lily in the back seat in her good dress, the one with the pockets, the one she only wore on days that counted, and his hands were doing the thing on the wheel again. Emily was already there. He saw her through the big front window, the good window, Lily's window, the one where the light came in, sitting in a booth with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug. And she wasn't reading her phone or looking at the door. She was just sitting very still in the room she'd made, and something about the sight of her waiting in her own creation closed Ethan's throat all over again. Is that her? Lily said, pressing her face to the car window. In the good window. That's her. She's pretty. Lily said it like a scientific finding. Then with sudden 7-year-old panic, what if she doesn't like me? And there it was, the fear underneath the mirror of his own handed down like an heirloom. Ethan turned around in his seat. Lily, look at me. He waited until she did. There is no version of this where she doesn't like you. I know that the way I know a pipe's gonna leak. It's not a guess. It's a fact about how the world is built. Okay, Lily whispered. They went in. And Ethan would remember the next 10 minutes for the rest of his life in the specific overlit permanent way you remember the things that turn out to matter. Emily saw them come through the door, and she didn't stand up too fast, or smile too wide, or do any of the things adults do that tell a kid they're being performed at. She just set down her coffee and looked at Lily, really looked the way she looked at everything, all of herself, pointed at one small girl in a dress with pockets, and she said, You must be Lily. Your dad said you liked this place. Lily, gripping Ethan's hand, studied her back. Two Carters reading each other. 11:44 in the morning. He said you made it feel like this, Lily said. The light? Did you really make the light? I didn't make the light, Emily said, sliding out of the booth so she was down at Lily's level. crouched on her heels, the way Ethan crouched to talk to his daughter. The light was always there. Nobody was letting it in, though. There were heavy curtains, and a wall right there, she pointed, that blocked the whole window. So I took the curtains down, and I moved the wall, and the light came in on its own. It was always trying to get in. Somebody just had to stop blocking it. Lily looked at the window. Then she looked at Emily. Then she looked at her father, and something passed over her small face, some understanding a 7-year-old shouldn't have been able to reach, and Ethan felt the floor tilt. Somebody had to stop blocking it. Lily repeated slowly. That's right. My dad blocks things, Lily said. With walls. We don't have anything on our walls. They're all white. He says he's too busy, but Mrs. Peterson says he's... She screwed up her face, recalling emotionally unavailable, which I don't know what it means, but she said it on the phone. Lily, Ethan said. But Emily had started to laugh, that real one, the one that broke a little in the middle, and she put her hand out, and Lily, without being asked, took it, and the two of them stood there holding hands and laughing at him. And Ethan Brooks stood in the doorway of a diner his daughter loved. In the light, a woman he was falling for had let in being gently roasted by the two of them at once, and he thought, this is it. This is the thing. This is what the blank walls were keeping out. They ate. Lily got pancakes because it was the rule. Emily got pancakes too because Lily informed her it was the rule, and Ethan watched his daughter appoint this stranger into the rules of their small, closed world in the space of a single meal. Emily asked Lily about the plastic pony, and Lily explained at length the pony's entire backstory and grievances. Emily asked what Lily wanted to be, and Lily said, a person who fixes things like Dad, but also a veterinarian, but also maybe the person who decides what color things are. And Emily said, that last one's a real job, that's my job. And Lily's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. That's a job, Lily breathed. Deciding what color things are is a job. It's my whole job, Emily said. I'll show you sometime. I've got 100 paint chips, and you get to hold them up to the light and decide. Dad? Lily turned to Ethan, transformed radiant. Dad, she has 100 paint chips. 12:02 in the afternoon, and Ethan Brooks watched his daughter fall in love with the exact thing he'd fallen in love with. Not Emily's face, but the way Emily saw the way she made a person feel like the light was always trying to get in, and somebody just had to stop blocking it. And he understood that he had been wrong about everything. He'd thought letting Emily meet Lily was the risk. He'd had it backwards. The risk had always been keeping them apart, keeping his daughter in a white room where nobody ever taught her that home was a thing you were allowed to decorate. And then, at 12:09, the thing happened that Ethan didn't see coming, the thing that would crack the whole day open. A woman stopped at their table. She was in her 50s, well-dressed, the kind of put-together that reads as money in a small town, and she looked at Emily with a warmth that turned a half-second later into something else when her eyes moved to Ethan and then to Lily. Emily Carter, the woman said. I thought that was you. I never got to thank you properly for the diner. My husband and I own the place. You know that we can't keep the tables empty since you worked your magic. Then brightly poisonously. And is this the family I didn't know you'd settled down? Your mother must be thrilled. The table went quiet. Ethan watched Emily's face, and for the first time since he'd met her, he watched her fail to read a room in time, watched the sentence land before she could get in front of it. And he watched something flicker across her eyes that he'd never seen there. Not stillness, not knowing, but a flash of raw exposed want, quickly covered. We're not... Emily started. We just met, actually, Ethan heard himself say, and immediately hated it. Hated the reflex, the fix-it-and-run muscle firing before he could stop it. I fixed her bed. Her the frame. I fixed a bed frame. 12:11 in the afternoon. The words hung there, small and stupid and true and utterly cowardly, and Ethan watched them hit Emily like cold water. Her face didn't crumple. She was too good for that. It just went still. The old, still the armored, still the still. She'd worn at the blue door before she'd let him take it off her. And she smiled at the woman and said something gracious and warm, and the woman moved on, and the table was quiet again. Lily looked between the two of them with her ancient eyes. "You said you didn't know what she was yet," Lily said to her father in the terrible, clear voice of a child. "But you just said you didn't know her at all. Those are different, Dad." Ethan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "I need to use the restroom," Emily said pleasantly, and slid out of the booth and walked toward the back of the diner with her spine very straight. And Ethan Brooks sat in the wreckage of one reflexive sentence and understood that he had just done in miniature, in 6 words, the exact thing he'd promised himself he would never do to anyone again. He'd gotten quiet. He'd stepped back. He'd found the safe distance and taken it. "Dad," Lily said, "go fix it." "Lily, you fix everything." His daughter looked at him, and she was 7, and she was completely right. And she was not going to let him off the hook because she was his daughter. And she'd learned that from Emily in the space of one breakfast. "You always say you can't fix people, but you never even try. You just fixed a water heater for a stranger at 11 at night. Go fix this. She let the light in for us, Dad. Go." 12:14. Ethan Brooks got up from the booth. He found Emily by the counter near the restrooms. Not in the restroom at all, just standing with her back to him, paying the check she'd insisted on grabbing her shoulders, set in that straight, brave line that he now knew meant she was holding something up alone. "Emily, you don't have to explain," she said, not turning around. "It's fine." It was the honest answer. "You did fix a bed frame. That's factually what happened." Her voice was light and even, and it was the most heartbreaking thing he'd ever heard, because he knew exactly how much work it took to make a voice sound like that. "I got ahead of myself. I brought a lot of feeling to a breakfast. That's on me. I read you wrong." "You didn't read me wrong." "I clearly did. You read me exactly right," Ethan said, and his voice came out rough enough that she finally turned around. "You read me perfectly. That's the whole problem. You read me so right that when that woman put us on the spot, I did the exact thing you told me I do. I got quiet. I found the safe distance and I took it. Not because it's true, because I was scared, and scared is the only thing that's ever driven me." 12:16 in the afternoon. He was aware of Lily watching from the booth of the whole diner, half listening the way small-town diners do, and he found he did not care. "You said a man who leaves by getting quiet doesn't drive downtown and tell a woman the exact way he'd fail her. Well, I just failed you, right on schedule, in front of my kid. And I'm not getting quiet about it. I'm standing here in the light you let in telling you I did it, so you don't have to wonder if you imagined it. I did it. It was real. And I'm sorry." Emily looked at him for a long moment. "Why'd you say it?" she asked quietly. "The bed frame. Why was that the reflex? Because if I said, this is Emily, He stopped, tried again. "Because saying the true thing out loud in front of Lily makes it real, and if it's real it can break, and if it breaks, she watches me get quiet and disappear one more time. It's the same fear. It's always the same fear. I keep her in the box. I keep you at bed frame distance. Same wall, same white paint." His throat worked. "You told me I don't have to decide the ending to let her in the room. But I let her in the room today, and then the second it got real, I tried to shove you back out of it. And that's Emily. That's worse than never letting you in. I'm sorry." 12:18. Emily set down the pen she'd been holding over the check. "Do you know what I did?" she said. "The second that woman said, 'Is this the family?'" "What?" For half a second, before I could stop myself, before I could read the room or manage anything, I wanted to say yes. Her voice cracked and she let it standing right there at the counter of the diner she'd built. "I've spent 4 years knowing the ending of every man I meet, holding everybody at arm's length, so I'd never have to feel the thing I felt when my dad got quiet and slipped away from me, one conversation at a time. And a stranger asked if you 3 were my family, and every wall I've got said, 'Don't you dare,' and underneath all of it, some part of me I thought died with my father just wanted to say yes." She wiped her face with the heel of her hand the way she did. "So don't you apologize to me for one scared reflex, Ethan Brooks. I've got 4 years of scared reflexes. You've got 3. We're the same. That's the whole reason it terrifies me. I finally met a man whose walls are the same color as mine. Ethan Brooks crossed the last 3 feet of the diner floor, and he did not get quiet, and he did not find the safe distance, and in front of his daughter, and the woman who owned the place, and the whole half-listening room, he took Emily Carter's face in both his careful hands, the hands that fixed everything, that never got sloppy when it was somebody else's, and he said the true thing out loud, where it could break. Then let's paint them a different color together, he said, not fix. You said you don't want to fix me, and I don't want to fix you. But we could stand next to each other's walls and hang something on them. Slow. No promises. But real. Out loud. In front of my kid who is currently watching us and who told me to come fix this because she's smarter than both of us. His thumb moved against her cheek. Is this the family? That woman asked. And I said the coward thing. So let me say the other thing. Now the real one. The one I couldn't say 10 minutes ago. He took a breath. I don't know yet. But I want to find out. Out loud. With you. Starting today. The diner was very quiet. The light came in the good window and lay across the tables the way Emily had built it to. Emily Carter looked at Ethan Brooks, and she could not read the ending, and this time she didn't try. Okay, she whispered. Out loud. Starting today. And from the booth, in a voice that carried across the entire diner, Lily Brooks announced to the room at large. That means she's the girlfriend. Finally. Dad, can she come see the white walls? She has 100 paint chips. The whole diner laughed. Emily laughed through her tears. And Ethan Brooks, the loud, quiet man, the fixer who never stayed, walked his daughter and Emily Carter out into the parking lot at 12:24 in the afternoon. And for the first time in 3 years, he did not feel like he was getting through a day. He felt like he was starting one. The weeks after that moved differently. Emily started coming around. Not fast. They'd both promised slow, and they meant it. 2 people who knew exactly how badly things could go had no interest in flooring the gas. But she came around. On a Tuesday, she showed up with a shoebox full of paint chips and sat on Ethan's living room floor with Lily for 2 hours, the 2 of them holding colors up to the blank white wall, the big one across from the front door, the first thing anybody saw coming in. This one, Lily said, holding up a warm gold. This is the diner one. This is the good one. That's a good one, Emily agreed. But it's your dad's wall. He has to pick. And Ethan, standing in the doorway of his own house watching his daughter and Emily Carter decide what color his life should be, said the gold. Lily's right. The gold's the good one. They painted it that weekend. All 3 of them drop cloths and a radio. Lily with a small brush doing the low part badly, and no one correcting her. And when it was done, and dry, Emily hung the first thing on it, a painting she'd brought from her apartment, wrapped in a sheet that she made them close their eyes for. Okay, she said. Open. Ethan opened his eyes. It was the painting. The bed with the covers turned down. The one she'd said she couldn't finish because she'd never seen the part that comes after. Except it was finished now. There were 2 coffee cups on the nightstand where there'd been one. There was a child's drawing taped to the wall in the corner of the painting, crooked at a kid's height. And the covers weren't just turned down and waiting anymore. They were rumpled, lived in the covers of a bed that people actually slept in, that a family climbed into, that had a Saturday morning in it. You finished it, Ethan said. His voice wasn't working right. I saw the part that comes after, Emily said. I've been seeing it for a few weeks now. I just needed a wall brave enough to hang it on. She looked at him, and Lily was between them, holding both their hands with paint on her fingers, and the gold wall glowed behind them, like the light in the good window. Turns out I know the ending after all, Ethan. Yeah. Ethan pulled her and his daughter's hand still in his, the 3 of them close in front of the finished painting on the gold wall. What's the ending? Emily Carter leaned her head against him, and for once, the woman who read everyone let herself be read wide open. No armor, the truest thing she had. There isn't one, she said. That's the ending. It just keeps being the part that comes after, over and over. That's the whole thing. That's what I couldn't paint. She reached up and touched the crooked little drawing in the corner of the canvas. It doesn't end. It just stops being empty. 6:40 in the evening, in a house that had been white for 3 years. On a wall that was finally gold, a finished painting hung where nothing had ever hung before, and 3 people who had each been taken and brought back in their own way stood in front of it in the last of the good light, and none of them said anything, because none of them needed to, because for the first time in a long time, for all 3 of them, the quiet in the room wasn't the quiet of someone leaving. It was the quiet of someone who had at last decided to stay. The gold wall changed everything, and it changed nothing, and both of those were true at the same time. It changed everything, because now there was a painting where there had been blankness, and once there was one painting, there was room for another, and by the end of that first month, there were 3 things hanging in Ethan Brooks's living room, and a photograph of the 3 of them on the mantel that Mrs. Carter had taken at the diner without any of them noticing. It changed nothing, because Ethan was still. Ethan still up at 6, still oatmeal and banana soldiers, still the man you called when your water heater died at 11 at night, and Emily was still. Emily still reading rooms, still going still when something mattered too much. But there was a difference now, and the difference was this: when the fear came, and it still came for both of them in the small hours in the reflexes, they didn't face it alone anymore. "You're doing the thing," Emily said one night, 6 weeks in, sitting on the gold-walled living room floor while Lily slept down the hall. Ethan was in the kitchen, and he'd been in the kitchen 40 minutes, reorganizing a drawer that did not need reorganizing. "I'm fixing the drawer. The drawer's fine. You're getting quiet." She said it without accusation, the way she said everything true. "Something happened today. Come sit down and tell me, or keep fixing the drawer and I'll go home. But don't stand in there getting quiet where I can't reach you. That's the one rule. Remember, we said that's the one rule." 9:50 at night. Ethan stood over the drawer a moment longer. Then he closed it and came and sat down on the floor next to her, his back against the gold wall, and he told her. "My wife called," he said. "Ex-wife, Claire, from Portland." Emily went still, but it was the good still now, the listening still. What did she want? Ethan rubbed his face. "She's getting remarried, in the fall. She wanted to tell me before Lily hears it on a Sunday call. That was decent of her, actually. It's the most thoughtful thing she's done since she left." He laughed short and without much in it. "And I sat there on the phone and I waited to feel, I don't know, something. The old thing. The thing I built the white walls out of. And Emily, I didn't feel it." He looked at her, and there was wonder in it, and a little fear underneath. "She told me she's marrying a guy named Doug, who sells insurance and coaches Little League, and all I felt was good for her. I felt glad. And then I felt scared, because if I'm not still hurt about Claire, then what have I been building my whole personality on for 3 years?" Emily didn't answer right away. She was quiet, the way she got quiet, when she was choosing the exact right thing instead of the easy thing. "You weren't building it on Claire," she said finally. "You never were. You told me yourself," she said. "The worst part was, you never really arrived. You didn't lose a marriage, Ethan. You lost the story you tell yourself about why you can't stay anywhere. And that story just called from Portland and told you it's marrying an insurance salesman named Doug." She reached over and took his hand. "The story's leaving Honey. That's what you're scared of, not Claire. You're scared because the last excuse just walked out the door, and now there's nothing left standing between you and actually staying." 10:02 at night. Ethan Brooks looked at the woman holding his hand against a gold wall under a finished painting of a bed that people actually slept in, and he understood that she had just done it again, reached in and named the thing he'd have spent months not naming, and that this time it didn't feel like being caught. It felt like being kept. "How do you do that?" He said the same question he'd asked her mother on the phone at 9:40 on that first night a lifetime ago. "I told you. My dad." Emily's thumb moved over his knuckles. "I learned to hear what's wrong before it gets loud. I used to think it was a curse. 4 years I thought it was the thing that made me impossible to love. that no man wants a woman who can see the ending before the first date's over. She looked at him. But you're not scared of me seeing you. You never were. That first day when I told you that you never stay long enough to be fixed yourself, you didn't run. You called my mother at 9:40 at night with your voice shaking. You're the only person I've ever met who heard me read them and came closer. Because you didn't read me to win, Ethan said slowly, working it out as he said it. Everybody else who ever figured me out, they did it to get something. To fix me or to prove a point. Or to have a reason to leave first. You read me, and then you just stood next to the wall. You said that. Day one. I just want to stand next to it so you're not the only one holding it up. You remember that. I remember every true thing you've ever said to me, Ethan said. It's a short list of people who've said true things to me. You're most of it. 10:09 at night, and Emily Carter, who could read everyone who'd been so tired of always knowing, leaned her head on Ethan Brooks's shoulder against the gold wall, and let herself for one more minute not know a single thing about how any of it would go. Down the hall, a door opened, small feet in the hallway. And then Lily appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, holding the plastic pony, her hair a disaster, her eyes half shut with sleep. I heard talking, she said. Is it a good talk or a bad talk? It's a good talk, Ethan said. Come here. Lily crossed the room and climbed into the space between them like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like there had always been a space there, shaped exactly like her, and she leaned back against the gold wall between the two adults and looked up at the finished painting. Mom's getting married, Lily said. The room went still. Ethan and Emily looked at each other over the top of Lily's head. 10:11 at night. How do you know that? Ethan said carefully. I'm not stupid, Dad. Lily yawned. You said Claire on the phone, and then you got the vacuum cat face, and then you reorganized the drawer, which is the thing you do when you're upset. Everybody knows that. She hugged the pony. And Mom told me herself on Sunday, about Doug. He has a dog. She sent a picture. The dog's named Biscuit. A pause. Are you sad? Ethan Brooks looked down at his daughter, who saw everything, who'd learned to read him the way Emily had learned to read her father. And he understood in one gut punch of a moment that he'd raised a child in a house of blank walls. And she had learned to read the emptiness anyway. Learned to watch for the vacuum cat face, and the reorganized drawer learned to monitor her father for signs of the quiet leaving. And he understood that the gold wall wasn't just for him. It was for her. It was so she'd never again have to learn to read a room by watching it empty out. No baby, he said, and he meant it all the way down. I'm not sad. I'm glad Mom's happy. Doug sounds nice. Biscuit sounds like a good dog. He put his arm around her. You want to know a secret? Yeah. For a long time I was scared that if Mom was happy without me, it meant I did everything wrong. But I didn't do everything wrong. I got you. And I got... He glanced at Emily. I got this. The gold wall. The painting. You holding paint chips up to the light. I got the part that comes after. He kissed the top of her head. So no, I'm not sad. I'm the opposite of sad. I just didn't have a word for it for 3 years, so my face made the vacuum cat thing while I figured it out. Lily giggled. Then she looked at Emily, and something serious came over her small face, the ancient knowing thing. Emily, she said. Are you going to leave? 10:14 at night. And Ethan felt his whole chest seize, because there it was, the real question, the one underneath all the others, the one his daughter had been carrying since a woman put her in her father's arms and set a suitcase on the porch and walked off without looking back. Are you going to leave? Not do you like me? Not, are you Dad's girlfriend? The only question that had ever mattered in this house. Emily Carter didn't answer fast. She didn't do the thing adults do, the too quick reassurance that a child can smell a lie in. She turned so she was facing Lily directly cross-legged on the floor, and she took the little girl's hand, the way she had in the diner, and she said, Lily, I'm going to tell you the truth, because I think you're the kind of person who wants the truth, even when it's hard. Is that right? Lily nodded grave. I can't promise you nothing bad will ever happen, Emily said. Nobody can promise that. Your mom didn't leave because she was a bad person, or because she didn't love you. Sometimes people can't stay, and it's nobody's fault, and it still hurts. She squeezed Lily's hand. But I can promise you this. I'm not going to get quiet and disappear. If something's wrong, I'll say it out loud. That's the one rule in this house. Your dad and I made it. Nobody gets quiet and slips away. If I'm ever scared, I'll tell you I'm scared. If I'm ever sad, I'll tell you I'm sad. You'll never have to watch me for the vacuum cat face and try to figure it out by yourself. Because that's the thing that hurt you, isn't it? Not that your mom left, that you had to figure it out alone. Lily's chin trembled. 10:16 at night. And then the little girl did something that undid every adult in the room. She let go of the pony she'd slept with since she was 4. The pony she'd carried through the divorce and the blank walls and 3 years of Sunday calls. And she set it down on the floor and put both her arms around Emily Carter's neck and held on. Okay, Lily whispered into Emily's shoulder. That's the rule. Say it out loud. Say it out loud. Emily agreed, her own voice gone to pieces, holding the little girl who'd just handed her something far bigger than a hug. Ethan Brooks sat against the gold wall and watched his daughter, who'd learned to read an empty house, who'd built a story where she was a thing that could be taken, put her arms around a woman, and choose with her whole 7-year-old heart to believe in the part that comes after. And he thought about a leaking sink 2 doors down, and a clean shirt he'd worn without deciding to, and a broken bed frame, and 6 words said light in a blue doorway, and he understood that every single thing in his life had been leading him, without his knowing it, up a back staircase to exactly this floor. The months went by, and they went by the way good months do, fast in the living and slow in the remembering. Emily gave up her apartment above the old bakery in the spring. It wasn't a dramatic decision. It was a Tuesday. She'd been keeping 2 homes and living in one for a while, and one morning over coffee, she just said, I think I should give up the 5th Street place. And Ethan said, yeah. And that was the whole conversation, because they'd learned that the biggest things could be said the smallest way when you'd already built the trust underneath them. The day she moved out, Ethan went with her to clear the last of it. And in the empty bedroom on the wall where a broken bed frame used to sit there, was a mark on the floor where the mattress had lain. And Emily stood looking at it for a long moment. I slept on that floor for 2 months, she said, beside a broken bed. Because I didn't want to call anybody to fix it. Because calling somebody meant letting somebody in. She turned to Ethan. And then my mother's sink broke, and she called you, and you came, and I heard your voice down in her kitchen through the phone before I ever saw your face, and something in me, I don't know, something woke up. I told her I'd check on my own place's radiator so she'd send you. I engineered the whole thing. She laughed wet-eyed. I've never told you that. I made my mother send you. The broken bed was real, but I could have called anybody. I wanted you. I'd never even met you, and I wanted the man with the quiet voice who fixed my mother's sink. Ethan Brooks stood in the empty apartment where it all started and stared at her. Your mother told me she sent me because you were living alone over an empty storefront, and she worried. My mother, Emily said, is a genius who has been trying to marry me off for 4 years, and the day she found a man who fixed her sink and had a voice that made her daughter go quiet on the phone, she did not hesitate for 1 second. She shook her head, marveling. We were both engineered, Ethan, by a 61-year-old widow with a leaky sink and a plan. She played us both like a fiddle, and we never stood a chance. And Ethan Brooks started to laugh, really laugh the way he almost never had before. Emily, the way she'd taught him without trying. Because it was true. All of it. The whole thing. The sink, and the shirt, and the bed, and the diner. Every piece of it quietly arranged by a woman who made coffee cake and knew a shut door when she was standing in front of one. That night he called Mrs. Carter. Ethan, she said, warm as ever, not the least bit surprised the way she never was. How lovely. Is my daughter finally moved out of that drafty apartment? She told me, Ethan said, about the sink, that she made you send me, that the whole thing was that you two set it up. There was a pause on the line, and then Mrs. Carter laughed a low, delighted, entirely unrepentant laugh, the laugh of a woman whose plan had clicked shut months ago and who'd been waiting patiently for someone to finally notice. "Ethan, honey," she said, "I have buried a husband and raised a daughter who feels everything twice as hard as anybody should. And I have watched that girl hold the whole world at arm's length for 4 years because she was so afraid of losing someone the way she lost her father. And then one morning, my sink broke. My sink. Actually, honestly broke. I did not break it though. I confess I thought about it. And I called the one man in this town everybody says is reliable and careful and sad. And you walked into my kitchen, and I watched you fix my sink, like it mattered to you personally. And I thought," her voice thickened, "I thought, there he is. There's the one who can stand next to her wall." Ethan sat in his gold-walled living room with the phone pressed to his ear. "How'd you know?" he said. "You met me for 20 minutes. "Because you took the coffee with the cream in it," Mrs. Carter said simply. "You didn't ask how I knew you were a cream man. You just took it, and you looked surprised that somebody knew a thing about you without you having to say it. And I thought, that's a man who's been alone so long he's forgotten anybody could just know him." She let out a breath. "My Emily doesn't ask either. She just knows. I raised a girl who knows things about people, and I found a man who was starving to be known, and I put a slice of coffee cake in your hands and sent you up her stairs, and then I got out of the way. That's all I did, Ethan. I got out of the way and let 2 lonely people find out they were the same kind of lonely." 10:40 at night. Ethan Brooks wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand. Emily's gesture, he'd picked it up without noticing, and he said the thing he'd called to say. "Thank you," he said, "for breaking your sink." "I did not break my sink," Mrs. Carter said with enormous dignity. "The sink broke on its own, and I merely failed to be sad about it. There's a difference, and I'll take it to my grave." A pause, and then softer. "Take care of my girl Ethan, and that granddaughter you gave me. I've got photographs of Lily on my wall now, did she tell you? Right next to Emily's baby pictures, where they belong." Ethan Brooks could not speak for a moment. "They belong there," he finally managed. "Yes," Mrs. Carter said. "They do. Good night, honey. Come by Sunday. I'll make the coffee cake. Lily cried when there wasn't more you told me, and I have been thinking about that little girl's tears every day since, and I intend to do something about them." They got married in the fall. Not a big wedding, neither of them wanted big. It was in Mrs. Carter's backyard under the tree, with maybe 30 people, and Lily was the flower girl, and took the job with the crushing seriousness she brought to everything that mattered, and Mrs. Carter cried the entire time, and pretended it was allergies, and nobody believed her, and nobody said so. And when it came time for the vows, Ethan Brooks, who had spent 3 years unable to say a true thing out loud, who leaked words like a cracked compression nut, who'd built a whole life out of getting quiet, stood in front of everyone and did not get quiet. "The first time I met you," he said, holding both of Emily's hands, "I put on a clean shirt to fix a window, and I didn't even know why. And you noticed. You noticed the shirt before you noticed anything else about me, and it scared me half to death, because I'd spent 3 years making sure nobody looked close enough to notice anything." His voice was rough, but it didn't break because he'd learned how to hold a true thing without dropping it. "You told me I never stay anywhere long enough to be fixed myself, and you were right. But then you told me you didn't want to fix me. You just wanted to stand next to my wall so I wasn't holding it up alone." He looked at her, at the woman who read everyone who'd been so tired of always knowing the ending. "So here's my vow, Emily. I'm not going to get quiet. Whatever comes, and things will come, we both know how much can break. We've both been taken and brought back. Whatever comes, I will say it out loud. I will stay in the room. I will hang everything I've got on the wall next to yours, and I will never ever make you or Lily watch me disappear one conversation at a time. That's the whole vow. That's the only one that matters. I'm going to stay out loud." And Emily Carter, who had spent 4 years unable to imagine the part that comes after who'd painted 100 empty rooms because she'd never once seen a full one, looked at the man she'd engineered her own mother into sending, and she said her vow, the shortest and truest one, anybody at that wedding had ever heard. "I always knew how everything ends," she said. "It was the loneliest thing about me. I'd meet a person and see the whole sad shape of it before it even started, and I'd hold them at arm's length so it wouldn't hurt when it ended the way I already knew it would." She was crying now openly, and so was half the yard. "And then you climbed my stairs and made my radiator stop knocking, and for the first time in my whole life I looked at a person and I could not see the ending." She squeezed his hands. "I still can't. I've been trying for over a year, and I still can't see how this one goes. And I finally understand why." Her voice dropped, and the whole backyard leaned in. "It's because it doesn't end. That's the secret I couldn't paint. That's the part that comes after. It just keeps being the part that comes after over and over for the rest of our lives. So that's my vow, Ethan Brooks. I'm going to spend the whole rest of my life not knowing how it ends. On purpose. With you." Lily, standing between them in her flower girl dress, tugged both their sleeves. "Is it a good talk or a bad talk?" she stage whispered to the entire backyard. "It's the best talk," Ethan said, and picked her up, and the three of them stood there together, and Mrs. Carter gave up entirely on the allergy story and sobbed into a handkerchief with unrestrained joy. That night, after everyone had gone home after Lily had fallen asleep in her flower girl dress on the couch and been carried to bed, Ethan and Emily stood in the living room, in front of the gold wall, in front of the finished painting of the bed that people actually sleep in, the one with 2 coffee cups, and the crooked child's drawing, and the rumpled lived-in covers. "Come here," Emily said, and took his hand and led him down the hall. The bed, their bed. Now, the same oak frame Ethan had fixed all those months ago in a lonely apartment over a bakery, the frame he'd glued and clamped and drilled and reinforced with a brass insert, so it would never strip out again. The frame that was stronger now than it had ever been new, sat solid and waiting in the room they shared. Emily sat down on the edge of it. She looked up at him, and there was a whole marriage in her eyes, a whole life, a whole part, that comes after, stretching out with no ending she could see. And she said it. The 6 words, the ones she'd said light and almost teasing in a blue doorway, on the first day, the ones that had cracked him wide open before he even understood he was breaking. "My bed is broken too," Emily whispered. But this time, Ethan Brooks didn't freeze. He didn't reach for a toolbox. He didn't go quiet and find the safe distance and take it. He looked at his wife sitting on the bed he'd made stronger than new in the house with the gold wall and the finished painting, and his daughter sleeping down the hall, and he understood all the way down at last what she had always meant. She had never meant the bed. Not once. Not on the first day, and not on this one. She'd meant the space between 2 lonely people who'd each been taken and brought back the space that had been broken in both of them for years, the space that neither a wrench nor a paintbrush could ever have fixed alone. It had never needed fixing. It had only ever needed someone to stay. Ethan Brooks crossed the room to his wife, and he did not fix a single thing, because for the first time in his entire life, there was nothing broken left to fix. He just sat down beside her on the bed he'd made whole in the home they'd made together, and he stayed. He stayed. And that was the whole ending, and it was the kind that never ends.